My name's Dave Dewey, and I'm the Director of Operations at the Whitney in Midtown Detroit. And when it first opened as a restaurant 30 years ago, it was a palace. It was the finest restaurant between New York and Chicago. The Whitney family is the people that are responsible for building this magnificent home. David Whitney was a lumber baron who made a lot of money, not just in lumber, but in all things natural resources. He was really instrumental in sort of creating this Midwestern Paris that Detroit was back in the early 1900s. David Whitney was really, the more you learn about him, he was a very interesting man. He went to visit his forests up in northern Michigan, where he owned several huge 100,000 acre lots of white pine. And after the Great Fire in Chicago, he provided all the wood to rebuild Chicago. He went up and he saw these thousands and thousands of leveled acres, and he actually reforested. And he was the first person to sort of take up that environmental conservation mantle. And he didn't do it because he was afraid of what was going to happen with trees. He did it because he looked out and thought it was the right thing to do. You can't help but imagine what it would be like to live here, right? I mean, that's just sort of a kind of a special moment for anybody. And you ask what I like about the Whitney, it's being a part of this history. The Whitney is the jewel in the center of Midtown Detroit. What I like most about the Whitney is that every single guest who walks through the door is predisposed to have a good time. Nobody comes to the Whitney because they just are looking to go somewhere to eat. We're not that kind of a restaurant. People are coming here to celebrate the good things in their lives. Everyone wants to know about the ghost stories that are related to the Whitney, and there are many. 5 years ago, shortly after I'd arrived, where a woman came out of the restroom, went to a manager and said, "You really need to go to the third floor ladies' restroom. There's a woman there in great distress. She's crying." And we had said, "What does she look like?" Because we want to make sure she's not wandering around the house. Well, she's kind of wearing an old-fashioned dress, but she's sitting on the sofa in the third floor restroom. So we go up to the third floor restroom. There's nobody. There's nobody in an old-fashioned dress. The restaurant is monitored by 15 cameras, none in the restrooms, but the 15 cameras watch different walkways, different avenues. Every single door is on camera. So we went to the cameras and we looked around, and there was no woman walking around in an old-fashioned dress that evening, and no one was ever able to sort of put what she experienced along with real life. So that's been a great piece of recent folklore. There have been a lot of sort of interesting deaths and things that were tied to the house. But this was also used as a place for the indigent in Detroit to kind of die with dignity, hospice, if you will, before there was such a thing. So there was a lot of death in the house. The room that we're sitting in today is the drawing room, and connected to that is the receiving room. And that room was used as a funeral home, if you could think about it that way. Bodies, and when David Whitney passed away, his body was actually viewed inside the house. His first wife did die inside the house, and that's sort of a mystery of how that occurred. We have a paranormal group who comes in and gives tours, and we do a dinner every month. And on their last visit to the carriage house, they actually were able to pick up a voice on an EPV that invited them to sit and stay a while. And so when those sorts of things happen, it's very interesting. The part of the piece of history that we've maintained since my group took over 5.5 years ago, there is a table on the second floor of the carriage house that is set for tea. And it's been set for tea for as long as anyone can remember. And one of the things that happens to me frequently is that I'll hear the elevators move. And there's nobody in the building. I know there's nobody in the building. And all of a sudden, the elevator will go from the first floor to the third floor, and the door will open, and it'll sit there for an hour. And then all of a sudden, the door will close, and it'll go to 2. And I can't explain that. I don't know what causes that to happen. We have it on camera. It's not like I'm making things up when I tell people this. If David Whitney is haunting the home, I think it would be because this is where he had the best times of his life. The future of the Whitney is very bright, mostly because, like all things in Detroit, we're tied to the city. The M1 rail is going to open in the spring of next year, connecting the Fisher Theater and all the things up in the new center all the way down to the Renaissance Center and all the things in downtown Detroit, we happen to sit in the geographical dead center of that rail. So from the Whitney, you will be able to access Ford Field, the new hockey arena, Comerica Park, the DIA, Fox Theater, the Fisher Theater. So we believe we will find ourselves sitting at the center of a great resurgence along Woodward Avenue. The most important thing I think that the Whitney provides for the Detroit community is a sense of history.